Long Beach Mayor George Bass is in the final days of heading up the leadership in his city.
Mayor Bass, of course, choosing not to run for re-election.
This morning, Mayor Bass joins us to look back at his legacy he is leaving behind in the city. Good to see you again, Mayor, and we can only call you Mayor for a few more days, I guess.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
That's a moniker that lives forever, though, right?
I'm known by firefighters I worked with as Chief Mayor.
Still, yeah.
Yeah, why not?
Past
Yeah.
the chief part of
Right.
it. But, you know, I'm glad that I have that name, that I was able to serve, and hopefully I did the right thing and did a good job. So it's a pleasure to be here with y'all. Thank
Absolutely,
Now, a
pleasure's
big
ours.
part of what you've been dealing with for the last several years, especially since 2020, was the harbor. It destroyed, and it's been a long process to get back going with that. But there's a lot of progress there. We're seeing the infrastructure and the outwall coming along.
Yeah, we have made project, but this progress rather. With these projects we're working on, these are funding we got through the state. It's Go Mesa funding, it's Tidelands funding, and it's the BP funding that we got after the BP oil spill. And we've been able to get those through the state and been able to apply those in the harbor there for the new outside walls, which is, it was very much needed for the protection of the inner harbor. We're still dealing with FEMA. You know, we went through arbitration and they did not see what we saw. What our engineers saw, but we're still working with it. The next administration will have to follow through with it. And I'll say one thing about the next administration is that we have returning aldermen that have been there for, you know, 2 of them for 2 terms, and 2 of them for 1 term. So you've got some learned aldermen there to bring in and welcome the 3 new ones who are great folks too.
Sure.
Yeah. When you talk about trying to do arbitration with FEMA, we've seen this over in Biloxi with Piers and Gulfport and some other areas. Anything, and this is kind of crazy, but it almost seems like the storm needed to be worse to get their attention. Am I right about that, in a sense?
Yeah. You know, we did not.
Which makes no sense to me, but anyway, yeah.
The full aspect of what that storm was going to be. We got more than what we thought what we were told, what we were looking at, and I think that the federal government at that time was looking at the same data we were looking at, that you know, or forecast rather, and didn't see what we saw. And then the problem became that they had people, and I hate to say this, but we have one person that came in to write up a PW for our harbor, and they didn't have a pen to write with. All they had was a pencil.
Yeah.
And they had to borrow a pen from us. And I asked them, I said, well, how long have you been working with FEMA? Well, they just hired me this past
So
week.
it was a learning
It
process.
was a luck of the draw
Learning
thing.
process.
Yeah.
And that's what we were dealing with. And I would say 4 out of 6 folks that we worked with were in the same situation.
Yeah.
We were not given the same type of response we got with Katrina. We had people here that had their boots on the ground, their eyes on what we were speaking to, and we got a better response. And I'll be the first one, I've said all along, if we had a Republican president in the House and the Senate, we'd have got a better response. We'd have got the response we need. We got pushed off to the back burner. You couldn't talk to FEMA without them saying, well, you know, this didn't happen or that didn't happen. You know, we were told from the word go, get a civil engineer to stamp the damages, and we'll accept that.
Okay. Well, an ongoing process there with the harbor, but other signs of progress in the city. We're seeing right now the railroad crossings, driving through there, big improvements on those railroad
major
crossings.
Improvements.
That you've worked a long time for those. That was an issue. Every time a truck goes over, it gets stuck.
Well, yeah, you know,
That
I
took
started
forever too, right?
and that did take forever. I started probably 5.5 years ago now, working with MDOT, working with Neil Schaefer Engineering, and secured the funding. And we started out with about $2.6 or $2.7 million anticipating this program going through. And you know, and I kept telling the folks there, look, we've got funding, we're doing engineering. And we had delays. CSX came through, they raised the tracks a little bit, it altered the engineering and surveys that they had done. They had to go back and do this. I had citizens telling me, you know, well, you're just a liar. Well, you know, you can't explain
Right.
Yeah.
the delays that you have to go through. But you know, and that's all right. I don't mind that. I know the truth about the situation, and we're seeing the results of that right now. We've got one intersection left to do it, Cleveland and Railroad. Unfortunately, you know, I'm already getting it before I even get to office. You know,
It's
you're going to
closed
do it
right
while
now, yeah.
school
Yeah.
while school's happening. But you know, it's going to be a several month project to get that one intersection done. And you know, the board voted at our last board meeting. We're going to pave all of Railroad Street from the west end of Long Beach to the east end of Long Beach. So you know, that's more improvements coming along. But it's, you know, it's been a while, and I'll grant, you know, the citizens have a right to be upset about it.
Yeah, that's a problem all over the coast, like we've seen in Biloxi and Long Beach as well. Gateway project seems to be going pretty well. I know your ultimate dream was to get Klondike 4-lane. That still could happen down the road, but having that artery, especially for storms, I know that's big. But like you said, now people might think a little bit stopping it instead of just going through the stoplight there. That was the big thing.
That was the big thing, and we this idea came up before we even took office for my first term. I did a 3-day retreat that I sponsored, bringing in all the aldermen, because I had 4 new aldermen, 3 returning, so it wasn't a quorum. So we did a 3-day retreat, and this was one of the things that we came up with. You know, and the way I phrased it to them, we need to repaint our front door.
Yeah.
And that is our front door, and it didn't look good. We were still showing the same damages from Katrina in 2005. So we came up with this idea. We hired, you know, the board hired the architect. You know, I was questioned many times by different visitors that I'd see, you know, why do you have these 2 traffic lights? There's nothing here.
Yeah, but now
There you
we
go.
see some signs there.
Yeah,
Welcome
we
to
see it.
Long
Good.
Beach, pointing down to downtown, and a lot of people are coming in for events in Long Beach. We just saw Jeep in the Coast a couple of weeks ago. And real quick, we're about out of time. How many new houses are being built in the city? Quite a few.
There were over 800 at one time. We've had a little slowdown, but it's picking back up. We still have a number of lots available, and it's still going on. And I'm glad you mentioned the events. The events have been just great. You know, we've got, you know, the trucks and tacos will be coming up.
Okay.
We've got the
Always something going on.
Jubilee coming up.
Okay.
And Jeeping too.
All right,
And the
Mayor
Jeeping.
George Bass, we are
Yes.
out of time. Thanks so much for joining us. Best of luck in your future endeavors.
Thank you.
And thanks always for your
Thank y'all.
Enjoy retirement.
Bill.